Hello, everyone. Welcome to our March edition of What Are You Reading? We have all of our librarians back again. Kristen from the Flushing Library, Christine from the Fenton Library, and Sherry from the Genesee Johnson Library. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing?
Hi.
Hi, Ryan, Kristen, Sherry, and guests watching.
Before we start, I'll talk a moment about some of our other programs. There's actually just one later this week. Larry Martin's World War II in Their Own Words. I spoke with Larry Martin earlier this week and talked to him a little bit about the program, which will be this Thursday at 6 p.m., which is tomorrow, March 18th. And he has conducted over 100 different interviews with World War II veterans. And he's going to be showing us his interview, which is about an hour long, with a Tuskegee Airman, which should be really interesting. He showed me a part of it, and it was really interesting. I definitely recommend checking it out. It won't be recorded; it will only be played live, and then Larry Martin will be here afterwards to sort of talk about what he's learned and what he knows, and that should be really interesting. So come check this out. You can find it on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel, or the gdl.org/virtual. And everything we talk about today, all the books we talk about, if you are interested in reading one of them, you can find the list of what we're talking about at the gdl.org/whatareyourreading. I'll put that up again later as well. But we can get started here. Who wants to start us off and talk about what their book recommendations are for March? How about Kristen? Do you want to start?
Sure.
We'll go clockwise, like usual. We can go around.
Okay. Okay. So let's start with probably the most popular book that has been out recently, which is The Push by Ashley Audrain. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it was one of the I think it's like Good Morning America book club books. And so I've seen a lot of patrons checking it out, and I thought I want to see what this is about. I don't usually read a lot of popular fiction, but sometimes something grabs my eye and I want to see, what the fuss is all about. So in this book, we have the main character who's also the narrator of the book, and her name is Blythe, and she is a mother, and she is kind of writing this letter, I guess, to her ex-husband, and she talks about how these really interesting situations happened, and about how her family kind of broke up and why that happened. And it's all from her side of the story. It's all her perspective. And basically they have this, her and her ex-husband, they meet, they have this really, happy story. They get married, then they start a family. And that's kind of where things turn. And she is very convinced that there's something wrong with her daughter. And her husband kind of convinces her that it's kind of all in her head. And then they kind of figure it out, maybe, and then they decided to have another child. And then she has the connection that she always wanted with her daughter. She has it with her son. And then something happens. I don't want to spoil it, but it's everything changes. A very big event happens, and everything kind of falls apart for Blythe. And this book is I don't know if I want to call it like something that I enjoyed, but it was very compelling, and I wanted to know what was going to happen next. It was something that is very intense. And I think that you really need to be prepared for that. It's a mother explaining like her situation with her children and her family. And yeah, it's definitely worth the hype. But I don't know. It was very interesting. I guess somebody in my book club, she checked it out at like right after I had finished reading it, and I said, "Oh, I just finished that," and she said, "What'd you think?" And I said, "It's interesting." I don't know if I liked it. I don't know, but it was very. I mean, I read it very quickly, and I couldn't put it down.
So I'm kind of curious, Kristen, because you say, like, I know you've had probably lots of time since you finished reading it till now, slept on it a lot. You still feel like you're not sure if you liked it, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's just, it's, yeah, it just left me feeling really weird because there's just so much that happens. And yeah.
I think that's like a good theme we talked about last time too, of a lot of the books we talk about here. Like we seem to all enjoy like compelling books that maybe they're not necessarily fun or enjoyable. That could maybe be its own like book club genre.
Definitely.
And so this is the author's first book, it looks like.
Yeah, yep, she's a debut author. That's her first book. I definitely think she I mean, it's a Good Morning America book club pick. I mean, she's definitely coming out with a bang. So I think her next book is going to be definitely high demand.
All right, we'll keep that in mind. Sherry, what do you want to talk about first?
I've been reading more nonfiction lately. So the first one I want to talk about is In the Shadow of Statues by Mitch Landrieu. It's kind of a controversial topic. He's the former mayor of New Orleans, and he made the decision to take down 4 Confederate statues in New Orleans, including the statue of Robert E. Lee. It kind of reads a little like he was planning to run for further office, perhaps, because he kind of goes through his whole life. He gives a down-to-earth account of his life from growing up in New Orleans. He's also the son of another former mayor. And then it talks about Hurricane Katrina and its aftermath. He was lieutenant governor when that was happening. Then his decision to run for mayor because he really didn't agree with what was happening in the city after the hurricane. And then finally, his thought process on the removal of the statues and how difficult it was to actually get them down. Contractors were threatened. They couldn't get a crane. They actually had to hide the names of people who were submitting bids just so that their lives weren't threatened. But it's a really good political memoir that makes you think no matter what your opinions on the statues are.
Maybe something that made me think about a little bit is a book I will recommend is Tinderbox, which we talked with the author, Robert Feisler, last summer sometime. Was a virtual program. And I think you can actually still go back and watch it if you're interested. He read some of the book, talking about a big part of the whole book is about a fire in a gay club in New Orleans. And a part of the book talks about something I hadn't known about before was when David Duke ran for the governor of Louisiana. And so that's also an interesting book that kind of talks on some of the same topics as well.
Yeah, he covers David Duke in this book. There's a whole chapter on that part of Louisiana history.
All
right, Chris, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I'm going to start off with something that's a little bit more whimsical. The Garden Spells by Sarah Addison Allen. This is a charming story filled with just enough whimsy to make it charming and a little intrigue to move it along. It has a sparkling of romance to give it some pizzazz. If you've ever read a book about an inanimate object, one that comes to mind is, I think there's a couple of them that came out about the Dakota in New York City. this book has that. So one of the main characters in the book is a tree. It's an apple tree. And if you like reading about inanimate objects as a character, you'll enjoy this story. The tree has its own kind of personality and is constantly up to no good throughout the whole story. Storyline. It's a contemporary fiction story that takes place in North Carolina, mostly about the Waverly sisters and thus the Waverly apple tree. And it just kind of tells the story about the two sisters and their relationship in North Carolina and how the tree fits into their life story, I guess. Uh-oh.
This sort of, you hear me now?
Okay, yeah.
It reminds me a little bit. I like the idea of the a character being a tree. I remember a book I think you read in the Fenton Book Club that was about a colony of bees.
Oh yes, yeah.
What was that called?
Oh gosh, what was that called?
I wanted to read that because that seemed interesting to me as well. Just the idea of a story being told through the point of view of a someone who's not a person, a tree or a bee.
Yeah, I'd have to get up and look in my file to see what the name of that one is. I can't remember what it was.
All right, Kristen, what else do you have?
Okay, so I'm gonna go with something a little bit more hopeful this time. This is a teen fiction book. It's called What I Carry by Jennifer Longo. This book I saw because it was a thumbs up 2021 top 10 list. It made that. If you don't know, the Thumbs Up Award is a Michigan award that through the Michigan Library Association that is picked by librarians throughout the state of Michigan. So this book is about Muriel, and she grows up in foster care, and she is now almost 18 years old, so she's basically on her way of aging out of foster care. And she has lived with many foster care families. And one thing that she has learned is that she always packs very light. So she only carries what she can fit in a suitcase. And so, but she also has little mementos that she carries with each visit. But she has learned throughout the years that she can't really form any emotional attachments to anybody, because if she does, then she just kind of ends up getting hurt. So as she is in her last year, she finally is with a new family, and she ends up meeting new friends and new people, and it's kind of like her journey through accepting that she can form these emotional attachments, that it's okay. And then it's also, she has this connection with a I guess he's like a wilderness guy. He's from the 1800s. His name is John Muir, and she's actually named after him. So she has this connection with him, and it's like talking about. It talks about the wilderness a lot, and it's a really good book. It's really hopeful, and it leaves you feeling really good. It's also really emotional, obviously because she's in foster care, so it's really sad at times. But at the end, it's hopeful. It's a good ending. It's not a book I usually read, but I really enjoyed it, and it's really good. I know. I mean, after reading it, I know why it was on the top 10 list. As somebody who's served on the group before, I think teens would really enjoy it, and I think adults would really enjoy it too. I mean, it's just a really good book.
Awesome. Before we go to Sherry really quick, has anyone here read The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna?
No.
So Marie left a comment saying she had recently read that and she thought it was a really good read. So that's something enough from there's a recommendation from another library patron. If you're listening to this, thank you, Marie, for leaving that comment. Sherry, what do you want to talk about next?
The second one I want to talk about is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. It's also nonfiction, and they did make a movie based on the book. It's the story of Bryan Stevenson and his fight for justice with the Equal Justice Initiative. They take on mostly issues having to deal with prisons, people who were wrongly convicted, people on death row, children who have been convicted and placed in prison for life. So he alternates stories about his work and the other justice issues that he's interested in with the story of Walter McMillan, who was a man who was wrongly convicted of murder and sitting on death row in, oddly enough, the same town where Harper Lee set her famous novel. I found this one really hard to get through. It made me angry. It made me sad. But it was really necessary, I think, to read it. I learned a lot. I spent a lot of time, like I said, crying and angry, but I was really grateful for someone like him who's willing to work on these issues.
I have heard from, friends, family members, and like library patrons who I don't even know very well who've all read the book, and no one who I've talked to who's read it hasn't come away like, just really affected by what Bryan Stevenson writes about. So I'd highly recommend that. And the movie has Michael B. Jordan, who's one of my favorite actors. So there we go.
And I did watch the movie, and the movie was fantastic, and also brought out a lot of those feelings. Like you just wanted to go and fight for the underdog.
I've also read the book, and it just stays with you. Like, it's been probably close to 5 years since I've read it, maybe. Because I know I was still at the Valley then, so maybe less than 5 years, but it sticks with you. It just does. And I follow the Equal Justice Initiative on Facebook, and I donate to them, and it just, it's just such a good cause.
Definitely.
All right, Chris, what do you have next?
I have next The Girl Who Fell from the Sky by Heidi W. Duro. This title was recommended to me based on 3 books that I've already read. So I went on Twitter, and there was this little thing, you type in 3 titles that you've read before, and they come back with a recommendation of a title for you. And this was the title. So I wasn't super excited about it, but I thought, well, whatever, I'm curious, I'm going to give it a try. It's a debut novel that tells the story of a young biracial girl who survives a family tragedy. And as she grows up, she is often faced with how to live life in between cultures, because her father is an Danish. So this book was rich with character development. I really enjoyed all the characters. There was only one character who disappointed me in the end, and his name was Jesse. But all the unique characters in the story were really added to the story, and I liked it. This is my sad book, though. This one really made me feel sad for a lot of different reasons. And when I finished it, I had to immediately jump into another book so I could forget.
This is just the one.
And her parents just moved into this house, and it's kind of known for being things have happened in this house, right? So and they spend 3 weeks after buying this house there, and then they leave in the middle of the night. And after they leave, Maggie's father writes a nonfiction book called House of Horrors. So in this book, you're getting Maggie's side of the story at like 25 years later, and you're also getting her father's book. So you're getting both sides. His book is this tale of like haunted house. Like there's all these things going on in the middle of the night, and Maggie is being haunted by these 3 ghosts, and all this stuff is happening to this family. But Maggie's side, she doesn't remember any of this. So she thinks her dad's just lying, and she kind of grows up like as an outcast because everybody knows this book. This book was like a bestseller, and so later on, her dad dies and he leaves her the house. So she goes back to the house and wants to fix it up, basically, and because she's a like an interior designer, and she wants to fix it up and like sell it. But then all of these hauntings start happening to her, so she's wondering, did what he really write? Is this true? So this book is kind of a slow burn. Starts out a little slow, and you're just like, all right, let's go. Let's get to the point here. But then you're like, wait a minute, what's happening here? It was really good. I enjoyed it. I think the ending happened a little fast for me because I was like, so this is what happened and now it's done? Like all this build up and then it just went, okay, we're done. So, but I really liked it. And if you like haunted stories, like, Shirley Jackson and all those kind of books, I would recommend it. It's a really good kind of haunted house ghost story type book. And it's just really good. It's a really good thriller type mystery type book.
There we go. All right. Thanks, Kristen. Sherry, what do you have next?
I have The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. It just made the bestseller list. It's a dual timeline book, so it takes place current and past. And is that not the most gorgeous cover? Mm-hmm. So in the current timeline, Caroline's in London on what's supposed to be her 10th wedding anniversary celebration. But she recently found out some difficult news and decides to take the trip alone and kind of clear her head. And while mudlarking, which I had to look up, apparently it's searching the shores of the Thames River looking for historical items that have washed up. While mudlarking, she finds a small vial with a bear on it, and the mystery behind it reignites her love of history and research, which she's kind of pushed down to work for her family's farm, I believe. But the second timeline has to do with the apothecary where the jar is from, which takes place in 1700s London. Nella's the apothecary, along with normal apothecary type things. She also dispenses poisons. Her number one rule with the poison is women are never to be harmed with their poisons. So she usually sells the poisons to other women to use on cheating husbands, etc., things like that. And one of her customers makes a horrible mistake with the poison, and it may lead the authorities to Nella and a young girl that's kind of helping her out, Eliza. This one was an incredible debut, and I think it would be perfect for those who love women-focused historical fiction, like people who liked Fiona Davis or Deborah Harkness's Discovery of Witches trilogy.
All right, excellent. Chris, what do you have next?
I'm going to talk about The Empty Throne next. And I'm not sure if I talked about this series back in January or not, but it's my current go-to when I'm kind of in between books and I need, just a little filler. So The Empty Throne is book 8 in the Saxon Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. It's a 13-book series, and I started reading this series about a year ago. Like I said, I kind of read it when I'm in between, want something just to kind of fill the time because I'm on book 8. So I'm not plowing through it, to just get it finished. I kind of go to it when I want something that I know I'm going to like. So this series accompanies the Netflix series titled The Last Kingdom. It is about Uhtred, who is the son of Uhtred, and takes place in late 9th century and early 10th century in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, and East Anglia. I absolutely just love these books. It has action, a little bit of romance, great characters. It's pure reading fun for me to sit down and read about Uhtred and his gang and whatever adventures they're going on in the late 9th century.
I can't think of something more intimidating than trying to get into a Bernard Cornwell book. So I'm always like, it seems like so much. But I'm. What do you? So that's how many books did you say are in this series?
13th. So the 13th
okay.
one just came out this past fall. And honestly, whenever somebody tells me about, oh, you should read this series, and it's like 15 books long, I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so for me to be involved in a series is really kind of a big deal.
That's a pretty good endorsement then.
Yeah.
All right, Kristen, what's next?
Okay.
Oh, sorry, 1 second. Krista had asked as a comment. She asked if it's similar to Game of Thrones. Can you comment on that, Chris?
A lot of people have said that about the series on Netflix, and I've never watched Game of Thrones, and I've not read Game of Thrones, so I can't really compare it.
Okay, maybe if someone who's listening they're into both, or if you like one and not the other, let us know. We can see if we can get some answers for Krista there.
And I probably will say that I probably will not tackle the Game of Thrones. I don't know why, probably just because I like this one so much.
Right. Well, the rest of the books are never coming out, so there's never going to be an ending. So don't get involved. Don't get invested. Trust me. That's my recommendation to you. All right, Kristen, what do you have next?
Okay, so I want to talk about Kindred by Octavia Butler. So I don't know if you've all noticed recently, but her books have been requested a lot lately. And in September 2020, she actually made the New York Times bestseller list for the very first time. I mean, she's been writing a long time. It wasn't for Kindred, it was for The Parable of the Sower, but maybe Sour, I don't know. I might be saying that wrong. But anyways, so we actually read Kindred for a book club in, I want to say it was September or October, I'm not sure. But it's another book that's really stuck with me, so I wanted to kind of talk about it. So Kindred is actually considered to be the first science fiction written by a Black woman. And in this book, Dana, who is a Black woman, she is wrenched, like basically taken through, it's 1976 California, and she's just pulled through time right back to antebellum Maryland. And she saves a white boy, like a little boy, and then finds herself like staring down the barrel of a shotgun from the boy's father. And then all of a sudden she's pulled back to her modern day time. And it just kind of like the whole book, she just kind of randomly gets pulled back to antebellum Maryland. But like each time she gets pulled back, she's like more time has passed. And so the boy gets older and older. And it's really a really good sci-fi book, like time travel, but it's very intense. It's a very difficult read. It's definitely not one where you can just sit down and read through the whole thing, because it's a lot of depictions of slavery, depictions of abuse, and what happened during that time. And but it's just a really well written and just, I don't know, it's just it's a really good book, and I would recommend it, if you like sci-fi, time travel, any of those things. And also just if you just want to read like a really good historical fiction book too. Because it's like all of those things. It's like so many genres in like one book. And I mean, and then I think like it's kind of like one of the first sci-fi books written by a Black woman too. It's just like, I don't know, it's just a really cool book.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Sherry, what do you have?
I have The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. She's the author of The Alice Network and The Huntress. She's one of my favorite historical fiction writers right now, and this one doesn't disappoint. It has dual storylines. starting in 1940 and it covers the war years. And then the second storyline takes place in 1947 in the aftermath of World War II. So it follows three very different women, Asla, Mab, and Beth, and their secret jobs at Bletchley Park cracking codes. Mab is kind of there really looking for a husband. Asla is there to kind of dispel the idea that she's a dizzy debutante. And then Beth is there kind of by accident. The others kind of get her a job there, and she finds that she's really good at the work to the point where she's kind of obsessed with codes. It's filled with suspense, betrayal, secrets, and even a little royal intrigue because Asla is Prince Philip's girlfriend before Queen Elizabeth. And I think it's just an amazing look at women during wartime.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. Chris, what do you have next?
What I have next is I just realized looking through my list of books that all of these titles that I'm talking about today are available on Libby. So each one I read came from our Libby collection. So the next one I have is Book Love by Debbie Tung, I think is her name. It's a graphic novel for all bibliophiles. I discovered reading graphic novels on my iPad while we were closed for quarantine, and I absolutely love the graphic novel on my iPad. Not sure I'd ever pick one up in print because the color just isn't as crisp. But this particular book, something you could read in an afternoon or an evening. The artwork is absolutely gorgeous. There were so many times as I was reading it that I wanted to take a screenshot and make a meme or something because what it was saying was just so pertinent to my life as a librarian. So it's a quick read, something you can enjoy like when you wait in the doctor's office or, just got 30 minutes of time to pass. And again, it's on Libby, so you can pretty much get it whenever you want, as long as no one's waiting.
There, on Hoopla too, there's a really nice graphic novel selection that I'm always impressed by. I want to go back to a comment. Krista commented again. She had said that she has read all A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones books. But she said that she doesn't know if George R.R. Martin will ever finish writing the ending. So I feel she's come to terms with it, as have I. It's not going to happen. All right. Thanks, Chris. Kristen, what do you have next?
Okay. So moving into nonfiction, another book that stayed with me for a while that I've read a few months ago is The Five, The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper. So I'm a big true crime fan. I love true crime. I listen to true crime podcasts all the time. And the author, Hallie Rubenhold, was she was interviewed on one of my favorite podcasts, which I've mentioned before, Criminal Broads. And in this book, the author talks about the victims of Jack the Ripper. Most of the time when you find books about Jack the Ripper, it's always about him and never really about the victims. And you don't really know much about the victims. So it was really kind of interesting to read a book that focused more on each of the women. So Polly, Annie, Elizabeth, Catherine, and Mary Jane, those are the names of the women. And they are all, the only thing they really have in common is that they were killed by Jack the Ripper. A lot of, information about them was that they were all prostitutes, which is not the case. Some of them ran coffee houses, some of them lived on estates and printing presses. Some of them actually escaped people traffickers. They have different histories. So it kind of was really interesting to read about what and who these people, what they did and who these people were. Another thing they all really had in common and kind of why they were on the on these streets at the time and how they ended up being victims was a lot of them were really poor. So they had some of them had really good lives when they first, at first, but then they ended up being, losing money or like they're, losing their husbands or something like that. So then they ended up on the streets. So, but yeah, it was a really interesting book. And I, if you like true crime, or you just want to know more about Jack the Ripper or anything like that, then I would recommend this book. It's very interesting. It's a busy day.
It's a really interesting way to look at something like Jack the Ripper, who we don't really know who he was, right? But then looking at like the victims, we do know who they were, and I feel like we could learn so much more. And it's such something obviously we don't see a lot of. That's really interesting. I like the idea of that book.
Yeah, because I feel like there's always this like speculation about who he was, and like there's so many books written about that, but there's not very many written about like who his victims were, what they did, and
Right.
So, and also it's very busy back here at Flushing today. So.
Oh, you're all right. You're good. Okay. Sherry, what do you want to talk about next?
Tuesday Mooney Talks to Ghosts by Kate Rakulia. I think that's how you say her name. I was a huge fan of The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin when I was younger. And this book's sort of an adult version. So an eccentric man named Vincent Price, of all things, he drops dead at a charity event. And his obituary makes mention of a scavenger hunt and a treasure to be found. All the clues have to do with Edgar Allan Poe. So soon the whole city of Boston's in an uproar. Everyone wants to win this treasure. And Tuesday Mooney is a 33-year-old researcher. She's still struggling with grief over losing her best friend when she was 16. So she sets out with a band of, for all intents and purposes, we'll call them a band of misfits. They don't seem like they would fit together to claim the treasure. And it's just fun. It's kind of dark at times, but I really enjoyed it. And I think if you love the Westing Game, this would be perfect.
I feel like that's a kind of a genre or a plot device that I kind of like this kind of like mystery hunt sort of thing. Also, I just wanted to say that you're not just to judge a book by its cover, but Sherry, you pick out like the coolest looking books, the most like colorful, really like intriguing covers on these books. I think are really, really neat.
Sometimes that's what gets you is the cover.
Chris, what do you have next?
My next one is another graphic novel called Check Please, Book 1, Hockey. I feel like if I say the author's name, I'm just going to really slaughter it, so I'm not going to say it. This is the adorable story of Eric Biddle, also known as Biddy, a former junior figure skating champion turned college hockey player. It's a coming-of-age graphic novel with artwork that really bumps up the story. Biddy is afraid of checking, and if you're not a hockey player or come from a hockey family, checking is when they slam you into the boards. He has a crush on the captain of the team, and he loves to cook. So if you've ever, had an interest in hockey, or you've lived with a hockey player or an athlete, this story will really hit home. The facial expressions on the characters really add to the story. I didn't know what to expect going into this book, but I so enjoyed it. I'm super happy that there's a book 2 that I get to read. But again, it was one of those things that I didn't want to just jump right into it and like read all the good stories in one setting,
I haven't read this book, but I want to bring it back up for a second to say that there's a quote at the top by Rainbow Rowell, who writes a comic book called The Runaways that is coming out by Marvel right now, which is one of my favorite comic books. And so I would check out her stuff as well. And this is interesting. I'd like to read this as well and check this out. All right, Kristen, what do you have next?
I actually don't have any more. So
do you want to talk about Confident Women again? You said you finished that.
Yeah.
And I went and I grabbed it because I have your copy right here.
Yes, I did finish it, and I loved it. I couldn't put it down. It's so good. go out and read this. Grab it from the library. I know it's in the library now because my coworker here today, Addie, has it checked out. So go get it. It's so good. There's such good stories in it, and I've never even heard of some of them. Some of them I have heard before, but yeah, you won't even believe some of these stories that happen. It's bananas. So
I was surprised by the Jude Devereaux one. I had never heard that before.
I know.
I was like reading. I was like, wait, what?
I know. It's so fun. Like, it's so weird, but like, yeah, it's such a good book. There's so many stories. And also check out Tori Telfer's other book, Lady Killers. It's you know, it's a little bit more violent, but it's good too. But I think I liked Confident Women more because I don't know, there's just something about like con women and like people who do con jobs that are just like, it's just so much more interesting. I don't know why, but it's just like, I don't know, like who has the audacity, right? Like
well, it seems to me it has to be like more complicated, right? It has to like to pull off some sort of elaborate grift, or there's so many parts to it. It's just so interesting. And if they do it successfully, then it's, you know, an even better story, you know.
Yeah, and some for like years, decades, like, yeah. But yeah, go out, get that book, read it. Make us have to order more copies, please.
All right, Sherry, do you have any others?
I do. The next one is Riley Thorne and the Dead Guy Next Door by Lucy Score. It's got a strange title, but it's really good. So Riley Thorne is divorced from a slimy ex who she's paying alimony to. She's living with a bunch of senior citizens in a mansion that's divided into like illegal apartments. So they all pretend like they're all related so they don't get in trouble. And then she's also trying to her psychic abilities, which have resulted in several awkward encounters. Then her neighbor turns up dead after Riley has a vision of the same event. And she's accused of the murder because she left a note on the neighbor's door saying, watch out, basically. And then she called like a police tip line and then went into the police station. So she's kind of a suspect. So she's forced to team up with a cute but annoying private investigator to discover who murdered Dickie, who's the neighbor. The characters are quirky, and the plot, even though it deals with the murder, it's funny. And I really hope she writes more in this series. She writes romance typically. This is probably, I mean, it's romance as well, but it's more romantic suspense. But all of her romance are hilarious, and this one is the same.
All right. Chris, do you have anything else?
Yep, I do have another one. It is my picture book recommendation for this session because, you know, I can't not recommend a picture book. It is Home is the In-Between by Natalie Perkins. I actually got to meet Natalie at actually twice now, at a event in Kalamazoo one time. And then when I went to ALA, she invited me to lunch with her. So I consider her one of my social media friends. This is also illustrated by Lavanya Naidu, and the illustrations in this book are so precious. So it's the immigration story of young Shanti as she learns to live in between cultures. She was born in India and her family moved to the United States. And so it kind of tells the story of her memories of life in India, and then how she and her parents are trying to learn and navigate life in the United States, all in a picture book format for young children. So the illustrations and the stories are so beautifully paired. I just would slow down my reading and just pore over some of the fine details of the pictures because they really brought the narrative to life. I would just give this book an A++. Share it with your children, your grandchildren, classrooms. If you go to church, share it with the children in the church. It's really, really a lovely story.
All right. Any other books we want to talk about, or have we reached the end here?
I have one more.
Okay.
It's called Ladies of the Secret Circus by Constance Sayers. It doesn't come out until next Tuesday, but I had a review copy and I couldn't wait to share it. So Lara's fiance disappears on their wedding day. His car's found abandoned on Wicklow Bend, which happens to be the same place where 30 years prior another man disappeared. So she tries to move on, but she has secrets. Her family has magical powers, and she has occasionally throughout her life encountered a mysterious man, usually dressed in period clothing. And then in another timeline, I'm all about the dual timelines today. It's Jazz Age Paris, and there's a secret circus that appears out of thin air only to people who have tickets. The performers can't leave the hidden circus. They're kind of trapped there. Only those who are human can leave. And I believe there's 3 humans in the circus, but they can leave. But the circus happens to be tied to Lara's family and her fiance's disappearance. It's dark, it's twisty, and if you liked books like The Night Circus, I think this would be perfect. And we have it already in the system if you want to add your name for holds.
Awesome. Was that it for you, Chris, or do you have any other
I think I was still reading this next title, but I finished it since we last got together. So I like to kind of talk about it one more time if I mentioned it last time. It's How to They, Them, a visual guide to non-binary pronouns by Stuart Getty. Basically, if you need a primer on non-binary or gender non-conforming pronouns and language, this is your guide. It's written and illustrated in a non-threatening way. It's helpful to everybody, I think. Those wanting to understand, those trying to figure out how to navigate language. It's really, I think, great for anyone interested in the topic. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's serious, but it's really a great resource. There's, in fact, a list in the back of the book of resources to consult. It took me quite a while to read it because I wanted to read and digest each of the parts as I went along. So that's all.
All right. So all of these books that we talked about today, again, you'll be able to find the list at thegdl.org/whatareyourreading. And so if you want to order these, you can get the titles there. You can do that there. Or you can call one of us at one of our branches or any of your GDL branches that you go to and request them, and we can put them on hold for you. Also, because Chris had mentioned earlier, all these titles are available that she talked about on Libby, our ebook reader app. You can also go to the gdl.org/digital services to learn more about all of those things. Actually, hold on. That one is changed. It's no longer digital services. It's just the gdl.org/digital. So pretend you didn't see that and look at this one instead. It is just, no, it doesn't want to change. There we go. Just the gdl.org/digital. You can learn about Libby, Hoopla, Frigo there, all of our different ebook resources and music and all kinds of other things. So take a look there. And also, again, the gdl.org/whatareyourreading. So thanks for joining us. If you read any of these books, please leave a comment or just let us know, what you've been reading recently. We'd love to hear that. And maybe if you leave a comment, we can talk about that on our show next month. So thank you all, and we will be back here in April again. Take care.